Picture this. It's past midnight and you're scrolling through true crime videos, thinking you're safe behind your screen. But what if I told you that history didn't end in 2018? What if the most terrifying criminal case in California's history took a turn that would make your blood run cold? What if the only thing standing between you and a living nightmare was your own DNA? Welcome back to Midnight What Ifs, where alternate timeline horror meets real history, and tonight, you are the main character in a psychological thriller that'll make you question everything you think you know about genetic genealogy and the Golden State Killer. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell because we're diving deep into dystopian territory where supernatural elements blend with cold, hard forensic science. And trust me, you'll want to stay until the end. Let's set the stage with what really happened. Between 1974 and 1986, California was terrorized by a phantom. Home invasions, brutal attacks, and murders that seemed random but weren't. For decades, the Golden State Killer remained a shadow until 2018 when genetic genealogy changed everything. Investigators used public DNA databases, traced family trees, and finally put a name to the nightmare: Joseph James DiNgilo. Case closed, right? Wrong. In our alternate timeline, it's 2019 and something impossible is happening. A copycat emerges, mimicking the old patterns with chilling accuracy. The same taunting calls, the same methodical break-ins, the same terrifying precision. But here's where your world tilts off its axis. When detectives run the new DNA evidence through those same genealogy databases, they don't find a distant cousin or a forgotten uncle. They find you. Not someone who shares your name, not someone related to you. The genetic match is perfect, impossible, and pointing directly at your doorstep. Imagine waking up to federal agents at your door, holding a warrant with your name on it, backed by science that can't lie. What would you do? Comment below because honestly, I'm not sure there's a right answer here. Your alibi is solid. You were nowhere near those crime scenes, but your DNA tells a different story, and in the age of genetic certainty, who's going to believe your protests of innocence? The evidence doesn't care about your confusion or your fear. But here's what makes this truly terrifying. The calls start coming to your phone. Unknown numbers, your area code, and when you answer, a whisper greets you using a nickname only your family knows. That whisper echoes in your mind all night, tossing you between fitful dreams and cold sweats. Who knew that nickname? Your sister called you that when you were 8. Your grandmother whispered it during bedtime stories before she passed. It was never on social media, never written down anywhere. Yet somehow, through the digital void, a stranger breathed it into your ear like they'd been watching your childhood through a window. Dawn slides across your kitchen counter when your phone buzzes again. This time, it's a legitimate area code with a professional tone that makes your stomach clench. Detective Sarah Reeves introduces herself, then recites your full legal name and an address you never gave anyone. The precision in her voice cuts through your morning fog like a scalpel. You remember uploading that raw DNA file to FamilyTree 6 months ago. Harmless curiosity, right? Everyone was doing it. Connecting with distant cousins, tracing migration patterns, maybe finding out if you really had Cherokee blood like your aunt always claimed. The sample sat in your desk drawer for weeks before you finally sealed the envelope and dropped it in the mailbox. Just another Friday afternoon decision that seemed insignificant at the time. Detective Reeves explains it carefully, like she's defusing a bomb with words. The public database yielded what she calls a match of one. Not a partial match, not a familial connection, but a perfect genetic fingerprint that shouldn't exist twice in nature. Her tone stays procedural, but you catch the bewilderment underneath. In 30 years of police work, she's never seen anything like it. She wants a fresh sample to rule you out. Standard procedure, she assures you, though nothing about this feels standard. You find yourself agreeing, partly out of curiosity, partly because refusing would only make you look guilty of something you didn't do. But as she speaks, your mind drifts to the news coverage you've been avoiding. The new attacks mirror the old patterns with surgical precision. The Golden State Killer investigation was a jigsaw puzzle scattered across decades and jurisdictions. Back in the 70s and 80s, different police departments didn't talk to each other the way they do now. The East Area rapist terrorized Sacramento, the original Night Stalker haunted Southern California, and nobody connected the dots until DNA technology cog. HT up with old evidence. When they finally linked Joseph DiAngelo to the crimes in 2018, it felt like justice delayed but not denied. Now someone's playing by the same rulebook, leaving timelines and taunts that mirror fragments clipped from old newspaper coverage. The calls come at precise intervals. The targets fit a specific profile. The methodology suggests someone who studied every police report, every witness statement, every forensic detail that was eventually made public. But the physical violence, the part that made those original crimes so heinous, that's where the pattern breaks. This copycat operates with restraint, as if following a script with certain scenes carefully omitted. After you hang up with Detective Reeves, paranoia creeps in like smoke under a door. You check your work calendar, confirming you were on a video conference call during last week's incident. 12 people saw your face on screen, heard you present quarterly projections, while someone who looked exactly like you was caught on a traffic camera 3 miles away. The timestamp doesn't lie. Neither does the facial recognition software that flagged the match. You submit both samples at the police station that afternoon. Blood drawn from your left arm, cheek swab scraped from inside your mouth. Standard forensic procedure that feels anything but standard when you're the suspect. The phlebotechnist makes small talk about the weather while your blood fills the vial, but her eyes keep darting to your face like she's memorizing your features for a police sketch. Driving home, your mind races through family secrets you've spent years trying to forget. The father you never met, whose name your mother crosses out on medical forms. The hazy story about a twin who died at birth, though she changes details every time you ask. The hospital across town that she refuses to drive past, claiming it brings back bad memories she won't explain. You've always felt like half of a conversation, like there were questions that would make everything make sense if you only knew what to ask. Now those gaps feel less like mystery and more like warning signs you should have recognized years ago. That evening, you notice things that probably mean nothing but feel like everything. Curtains shift in the house across the street when you're not looking directly at them. The porch light blinks twice every night at exactly 2:19 in the morning. You know because you've started staying awake to watch for it, drawn to the window like it's calling your name. Your neighbor's dog barks at shadows that look suspiciously like human silhouettes, but when you peer outside, the sidewalk stays empty. The voicemail arrives while you're heating leftover pizza. Your phone buzzes once, displaying a number you don't recognize. By the time you reach it, whoever called has already hung up. The message that waits makes your blood freeze in your veins. It's your own voice, breathing steadily for 10 seconds before saying one sentence you know with absolute certainty you never spoke. I remember everything now. Your hands shake as you play it back. Same vocal patterns, same slight rasp when you pronounce certain consonants, same rhythm that your ex-girlfriend used to tease you about. But the words feel alien, like someone else borrowed your throat to deliver a message you don't understand. 3 options sprawl before you like paths in a dark forest. You could call the number back, though something tells you that conversation won't end well. You could confront your mother, demand answers about the hospital and the twin and the father who vanished before you were born. Or you could hire a lawyer, build walls of legal protection before this situation gets any stranger. But before you can decide, your phone rings again. Detective Reeves sounds stunned, like she's reading results that don't make scientific sense. Your blood sample came back clean, no match to anything in the database. But your cheek swab matches perfectly to DNA found at the crime scene, down to markers that should be impossible to fake. 2 samples from the same person, taken minutes apart, telling completely different stories about who you are and what you might have done. 2 samples from the same person telling completely different stories. The phrase bounces around your skull like a pinball while Detective Reeves tries to explain what shouldn't be scientifically possible. Your blood says you're innocent. Your saliva says you're guilty. Both came from your body within 5 minutes of each other. She mentioned something called tetragrammatic chimerism, and you barely catch the explanation through the static of disbelief. It's rare, she says, but documented. Sometimes when twins develop in the womb, one absorbs the other so early that both sets of DNA survive in different tissues. Your blood carries one genetic signature. Your mouth carries another. You're literally two people in one body, a biological contradiction walking around in sneakers and yesterday's jeans. The science feels like science fiction, but it explains why you've always felt incomplete, like half of a conversation happening in a language you almost understand. Detective Reeves suggests you dig into your medical history, see if there's any documentation of twin pregnancy or complications at birth. Her tone stays professional, but you catch something else underneath, a detective's instinct that this case just became much more complicated. You spend the next 3 hours hunting through boxes in your mother's basement, searching for records she's always been mysteriously protective about. The birth certificate you find is stamped twice, once in blue ink, once in black, like two different clerks processed the same event. Tucked behind it, a faded NICU note from 31 years ago mentions twin pregnancy, fetal resorption at week 8, singleton delivery with minor complications. Minor complications. As if losing half of yourself before you were even born qualifies as minor. When you confront your mother, she goes pale and starts reorganizing kitchen drawers that don't need organizing. She won't give you specifics, just fragments that feel like pieces of a puzzle she's spent decades trying to forget. Finally, while scrubbing a coffee mug that's already clean, she slips. Her voice gets small, distant, like she's talking to someone who isn't there. They said only one heartbeat would be strong enough. One heartbeat, one life, one chance at making it out of the womb alive. But what if the other heartbeat didn't disappear? What if it just went quiet, waiting for the right moment to remind the world it existed? Meanwhile, across California, the Copycat continues operating with surgical precision. The evidence board in your mind maps old neighborhoods where the original Golden State Killer once terrorized families: Rancho Cordova, Citrus Heights, Contra Costa County. Now those same areas light up with pins marking smaller, more cryptic intrusions. Not the violent home invasions that made headlines in the 80s, but something subtler and somehow more disturbing. Micro break-ins where nothing gets stolen but everything feels violated. Objects rearranged just enough to notice. A single page torn from a map book, always the same page showing local elementary schools. It's not about physical violence, it's about the invasion of space and certainty, the knowledge that someone has been inside your sanctuary, breathing your air, touching your things, learning your patterns. The psychological violation cuts deeper than any physical wound because it attacks the one place you thought you were safe. Home becomes just another crime scene waiting to happen. Your inbox pings while you're reading old hospital reports, a direct message from a genealogy forum user named Ear2Now. The username makes your stomach clench, a reference to the East Area Rapist, the old moniker for the Golden State Killer before investigators connected all the dots. The message contains only 4 words, but they hit you like a medical diagnosis you didn't want to hear. Some twins end up one. Before you can screenshot the message or reply, it vanishes. Not deleted, vanished, like it was never there at all. The user profile shows no history, no other posts, no trace that Ear2Now ever existed. But those 4 words burn in your memory, confirmation of something you've suspected but been afraid to acknowledge. You're not alone in your own body. You never have been. The landline rings while you're still staring at the empty message thread. Blocked number, same as before. This time you answer on the second ring, and what you hear makes your hand shake so badly you nearly drop the phone. It's your voice again, but older somehow, worn smooth by experiences you haven't had. Calm in a way that suggests intimate knowledge of terrible things. The voice knows about the hiding place of your childhood spare key, the loose brick behind the garage where you stashed allowance money and comic books. You never told anyone about that spot. Not your mother, not your closest friends, not any romantic partner. Some secrets are too small and precious to share, but apparently this voice has access to memories you thought were yours alone. It tells you about the neighbor's dog that bit you when you were 7, about the scar on your knee from falling off your bicycle, about the recurring dream where you're drowning but somehow still breathing underwater. Details only you should know, spoken in your voice by someone who isn't you. The conversation lasts 37 seconds. When it ends, you sit in silence, processing the impossible reality that someone out there shares not just your DNA, but your memories. The moral tension feels like standing at the edge of a cliff, knowing that any choice you make could send you tumbling into an abyss you might not survive. Do you tell Detective Reeves about the call and risk becoming the prime suspect in a case that's already turning your life inside out? Or do you investigate quietly, following breadcrumbs that might lead you to confront whatever other version of yourself is walking around committing crimes in your genetic signature? You choose both, because half measures feel like cowardice when your entire identity is at stake. You schedule a meeting with Detective Reeves for tomorrow afternoon while simultaneously planning your own investigation into hospital records and storage units your mother thinks you've forgotten about. That evening, you drive to the climate-controlled facility across town where your family stores boxes of Christmas decorations and furniture too good to throw away but too ugly to display. Unit 247 contains everything your mother couldn't bear to keep in the house but refused to destroy. You remember helping her move these boxes years ago, though she never explained why certain items needed to be hidden rather than simply donated. In the back corner, behind artificial Christmas trees and your grandfather's army surplus trunk, you find an envelope marked with your mother's careful handwriting. Do not open. The paper feels fragile between your fingers, yellowed with age and weighted with secrets that have been waiting decades for the right moment to surface. Inside, you discover 2 hospital bracelets. Both bear your family surname, both show the same birth date, both are sized for newborn wrists. But one shows your first name, while the other displays only a single initial, the first letter of a name that was never spoken aloud, belonging to a person who officially never existed. 2 hospital bracelets, same date, different names. You stare at that single initial until your eyes water, trying to imagine what name your parents might have chosen for a child who technically never existed. The plastic feels brittle between your fingers, like evidence of a crime that happened before you were old enough to understand what you'd lost. You drive home with the bracelets in your pocket, their weight somehow heavier than physics should allow. The rational part of your mind keeps C. Cataloging explanations, clerical errors, duplicate prints, some mundane hospital mix-up that has nothing to do with vanished twins or genetic impossibilities. But rationality feels thin as tissue paper when your own voice is calling you from blocked numbers, speaking memories only you should possess. 3 days pass in a haze of normal routine that feels anything but normal. Work, groceries, Netflix, sleep. Each ordinary moment carries an undercurrent of watching, waiting, like the calm before a storm that's already started but hasn't reached you yet. You catch yourself checking locks twice, peering around corners before turning them, listening for footsteps that match your own rhythm too perfectly. Thursday night, you remember you left your laptop charger in your car. The parking structure beneath your apartment building tastes like copper and exhaust fumes, the fluorescent lights casting everything in sickly yellow. Your footsteps echo off concrete walls in a rhythm you've walked 1,000 times before, so when you hear a second set of steps matching yours perfectly, your brain takes a moment to process that the sound isn't coming from your feet. He steps out from between 2 concrete pillars like he's been waiting for this moment his entire life. Your height, your posture, the same slight forward lean of your shoulders that your physical therapist always tells you to correct. But it's the hoodie that stops your breath completely, navy blue with your university logo, from the year you spent there before transferring. Except you never owned that hoodie. You remember wanting it, seeing it in the campus bookstore, deciding it was too expensive for a school you weren't sure you'd finish at. The encounter lasts maybe 30 seconds, but those seconds stretch like taffy, each detail burning itself into your memory with surgical precision. He doesn't look surprised to see you. If anything, his expression suggests this meeting was inevitable, scripted, long overdue. When he speaks, it's a sentence you whispered once as a 7-year-old to calm nightmares about drowning. The water can't hurt you if you remember how to breathe. Words you never told anyone, spoken in your voice by someone who shouldn't exist. He drops something that clatters on the concrete, your storage unit key, the one that should be in your jeans pocket right now. Before you can react, he turns toward the stairwell and disappears around the corner with movements that mirror your own so exactly it's like watching a reflection walk away from a mirror. You give chase, your sneakers squeaking against concrete as you pound up the stairs. But the stairwell empties into a street that stretches in both directions with no sign of anyone running, walking, or even existing in this particular slice of Thursday night reality. When you check the security footage the next morning, it shows only you, running alone like you're chasing invisible demons through an empty parking structure. The behavior patterns feel familiar in ways that make your skin crawl. This isn't random chaos. It's methodical, observational, designed to exploit small vulnerabilities you didn't know you had. The original Golden State Killer operated the same way, watching routines, learning schedules, finding the tiny cracks in people's armor that let him slip inside their lives like smoke through a keyhole. Always minimal trace, maximum psychological impact. Back at the storage unit, you test the key with hands that shake despite your best efforts at control. It works perfectly, sliding into the lock like it belongs there. Inside, taped to the wall behind your mother's Christmas decorations, you find an envelope that definitely wasn't there 3 days ago. Your name is written on the front in handwriting you don't recognize, though something about the letter formation feels uncomfortably familiar. The family tree sketched inside takes your breath away. It's drawn in your mother's careful penmanship, but with branches you've never seen before. Names that don't appear in any family Bible or reunion photo, dates that don't align with the stories you grew up hearing. At the bottom, a note in the same handwriting, "Ask Dr. Klein." A hospital directory search reveals Dr. Marcus Klein, retired obstetrician with 43 years of experience, and what the internet diplomatically calls a history of innovative fertility procedures. The kind of innovations that sometimes involved donor records kept off official books, embryo transfers that weren't quite regulation, and families created through methods that pushed the boundaries of what medical ethics considered acceptable. Was there a clandestine mix-up, a missing twin quietly adopted into another family, or something stranger, something that exists in the gray areas where science fiction bleeds into science fact? Your phone starts acting up in ways that would be annoying if they weren't so precisely timed to your doppelganger encounters. Timestamps skew by exactly 2 minutes each time he appears, like reality itself is having trouble keeping track of which version of you exists in which moment. That voicemail you saved, the one with your own voice breathing words you never spoke, now it shows a creation date from 3 years ago, long before any of this started. You schedule a meeting with Dr. Klein for Saturday afternoon. When you tell Detective Reeves about it, she insists on coming along. Part of you wants to refuse, to handle this family mystery without police involvement, but another part recognizes that you're in over your head with currents you don't understand and can't control alone. You decide to split the difference. A public cafe, neutral territory where a retired doctor might feel comfortable sharing decades-old secrets. And a second phone in your jacket pocket, recording everything, because you have the feeling that whatever Dr. Klein knows about your family history, it's going to change everything you thought you understood about who you are. Saturday arrives gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that makes everything look slightly out of focus. The cafe Detective Reeves suggested sits on a busy corner downtown, populated by weekend laptop warriors and families with young children. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that someone among them might be about to learn they're not entirely human in ways they never imagined. Dr. Klein walks in 5 minutes early, scanning the room with the careful attention of someone who's spent decades keeping secrets. When his eyes land on your face, he stops moving entirely. His expression shifts from professional courtesy to something that looks almost like recognition, tinged with what might be guilt or fear or simply the weight of knowledge that's been carried too long. He approaches your table with measured steps, each one seeming to require careful consideration. Detective Reeves shows her badge and introduces herself, but Dr. Klein's attention never leaves your face. When he finally speaks, his words hit you like a diagnosis you weren't prepared to hear. "I was told I'd meet you yesterday." The words hang in the air like smoke from a fire that hasn't been lit yet. Dr. Klein settles into his chair with the careful movements of someone who's been carrying secrets for so long they've become part of his posture. Detective Reeves leans forward, pen ready, but before anyone can ask the obvious questions, Dr. Klein's phone buzzes. He glances at it, frowns, then looks back at you with something that might be pity. The news has leaked. Person of interest identified as genealogist. By the time you get home from the cafe, your street has transformed into something you barely recognize. Neighbors you've waved to for years now peer through curtains like you're a walking biohazard. Mrs. Peterson from 2 houses down is installing a second doorbell camera, angling it directly toward your driveway. The Johnsons have put their house on the market with a sign that went up sometime between noon and now. Your neighborhood fractures into factions faster than you thought possible. The Nextdoor app becomes a digital tribunal where armchair detectives dissect your morning routine and debate whether your choice of breakfast cereal indicates sociopathic tendencies. Porch cameras multiply like digital mushrooms after rain, each one a mechanical eye tracking your movements with the dedication of a surveillance state. The Homeowners Association calls an emergency meeting for Tuesday night. You're not invited, but the agenda gets leaked anyway. Item 3 reads, "Proposal for voluntary DNA sweeps to clear residents faster and restore neighborhood property values." Item 4, discussion of temporary exclusion protocols for residents under criminal investigation. They're talking about you like you're a contamination that needs to be managed rather than a person who's lived here for 6 years and has never so much as forgotten to bring in your trash cans on time. City Council member Patricia Walsh, sensing political opportunity in public fear, floats the idea of curfew zones during her Thursday morning radio interview. Certain blocks, certain residents, certain restrictions for the safety of law-abiding citizens. She doesn't mention you by name, but everyone knows. The horror isn't supernatural. It's social, psychological, the way fear spreads through communities like a virus that turns neighbors into strangers and strangers into enemies. Detective Reeves calls to warn you that cooperation makes you look better in the court of public opinion, but you feel the walls closing in from all directions. The original Golden State Killer investigations struggled with jurisdiction and fear. Different police departments protecting their turf, while a predator moved freely between city limits. Now you're living in the reverse situation. Too much cooperation, too much surveillance, too much attention from people who want to solve the mystery by eliminating you from the equation entirely. Today's technology should help. Doorbell cameras and crowdsourced crime maps should make communities safer, more connected, better informed. Instead, they've turned your block into a panopticon where every grocery run becomes evidence, and every late-night walk to your car gets analyzed by amateur investigators who learned forensic science from true crime podcasts. The manila envelope appears in your mailbox Wednesday morning with no postage stamp and no return address. Inside, a photocopied map of Sacramento's bike paths, the same routes the original offender used to navigate between neighborhoods without being seen by patrol cars. But someone has drawn a new red path in ballpoint pen, snaking through familiar streets before ending at a house you recognize immediately. Your childhood home, where your mother still lives, where those hospital bracelets waited in storage for 31 years. When you confront her that evening, she finally cracks. Yes, there was a second birth bracelet. Yes, the hospital made it right by starting you over with a clean record. But she won't name who decided that, won't explain what starting over actually meant, won't elaborate on what kind of arrangement required erasing evidence of a second baby who technically never existed. Her hands shake as she makes tea she doesn't drink, and you realize your mother has been carrying this secret like a weight that's been slowly crushing her for 3 decades. The dystopian drift accelerates with each passing day. A local startup called Genealogy sets up free community DNA kiosks at 3 grocery stores, marketing them as a way for concerned citizens to help solve crimes while shopping for milk and bread. The kiosks look like photo booths, but instead of pictures, they collect cheek swabs and promise to cross-reference your genetic signature against unsolved cases. Voluntary, they claim, though the social pressure to participate feels anything but optional. Your employer quietly places you on administrative leave Friday afternoon. Pending resolution of your situation, they explain, for the safety and comfort of other employees. You've worked there for 4 years without a single disciplinary action, but none of that matters when your DNA makes headlines and your face becomes associated with California's most notorious cold case. You decide to take back control the only way you know how. If someone is using genealogy to frame you, you'll use genealogy to catch them. You call Detective Reeves with a propose. Al, a genealogical trap, a curated family tree seeded with false information known only to you and the investigation team. Bait designed to make the copycat reveal how he knows details about your lineage that aren't available in any public database. You spend Saturday creating a fictional great-aunt named Martha Delmore, complete with birth records from a small town in Oregon and a carefully constructed online presence spanning 40 years. You plant her in 3 genealogy forums, establishing connections to your known family members while giving her a biography full of specific details that only someone with access to your fabricated family tree would know. Martha Delmore's birthday is March 15, 1943. Her maiden name was Henderson. She worked as a librarian in Portland and collected vintage postcards. She never married and left no children, which is why nobody in your real family would ever have heard of her. She exists only in digital records you've created and the trap you've laid for whoever is wearing your face while committing crimes. That night, your phone rings at 2:47 a.m. Blocked number, your own voice, calm and steady like it's reading from a script. Your voice wishes Martha Delmore a happy 79th birthday and mentions how much she would have enjoyed the postcard collection you donated to the Portland Public Library. Details that exist nowhere except in the fictional biography you created 18 hours earlier. Someone is watching your digital footprints in real time, tracking every move you make in cyberspace with the same precision they're using to track your physical movements through the world. The trap worked, but instead of catching your tormentor, it's revealed just how closely they're monitoring every aspect of your attempt to prove your innocence. You don't sleep after that call. At 3:00 a.m. exactly, you hear tape being pressed against your front door. When you check 5 minutes later, a calendar page is attached to the wood with clear packing tape. Next Friday's date is circled in red ink with a handwritten message below, "Meet where we started." But it's the signature that stops your heart completely. Your mother's maiden name, written in handwriting that matches your own, followed by the words Mercy General Hospital, Delivery Wing, Room 347. The address burns in your mind like a brand you never asked for, marking a place where your story began 31 years ago and where it might end next Friday night. You stare at that calendar page until the numbers blur, trying to process the impossibility of someone knowing details about your birth that were supposedly erased from official records decades ago. 3 paths sprawl before you like doors in a nightmare, each one leading to consequences you can't fully predict but will have to live with forever. The weight of choice feels heavier than physics should allow, because you know that whatever you decide next will determine not just whether you catch this copycat, but whether you survive the process with your sanity intact. Door number 1, the trap. You partner fully with Detective Reeves, stage a meticulous sting operation at the hospital with controlled access points, decoy routes, and a planted family file waiting in medical records like bait in a carefully constructed snare. This path offers the best chance of catching your doppelganger, but it risks losing him entirely if he senses the net closing around him. Worse, it risks your privacy if that fabricated file becomes public record, turning your most intimate family secrets into evidence in a case that's already destroyed your reputation. Door number 2, the bloodline. You confront Dr. Klein privately first, pressing him for donor logs and delivery anomalies that might explain how 2 identical genetic signatures came to exist in the world. If there was a twin, a donor swap, or some illegal medical practice that created this impossible situation, you might expose it before law enforcement gets involved. But Dr. Klein's nervous behavior suggests the cover-up extends far beyond one retired obstetrician, and your doppelganger has already proven he can read your moves in near real time. Door number 3, the broadcast. You go public with a carefully crafted statement explaining tetragrammatic chimerism and revealing your false leaf genealogy trap, inviting the copycat to meet you under bright media lights where cameras and witnesses make violence impossible. This gambit could flush him out of the shadows, but it might also turn your neighborhood fully against you, feeding the dystopian surveillance state that's already making your daily life feel like a prison sentence. Each choice carries the weight of moral complexity. Privacy versus safety, justice versus survival, truth versus the comfortable lies that let people sleep at night. You find yourself wondering which door you would choose if this nightmare was happening to someone else, if you were watching from the outside instead of living it from the inside. In the end, you choose door 1. The trap feels like the cleanest option, the most controllable variables in a situation that's spun completely beyond your ability to predict or manage. You call Detective Reeves at 6 in the morning, your voice hoarse from a sleepless night spent staring at that calendar page. The hospital corridors hum with fluorescent buzz that gets under your skin like an electrical current running through your nervous system. Everything smells like industrial toner cartridges and lemon-scented floor cleaner, the kind of antiseptic sterility that's supposed to feel clean but instead feels artificial, wrong, like nature scrubbed away, and replaced with something that only pretends to be safe. Officers blend into the environment as orderlies and maintenance workers, their earpieces hidden beneath surgical caps and their weapons concealed under medical scrubs that transform them into invisible guardians moving through halls where life begins and ends with equal frequency. Cameras watch the delivery wing from angles that should cover every possible approach, every corridor that leads to room 347, where this story supposedly started 3 decades ago. You wait in a family lounge 6 rooms away from the meeting point, your planted file tucked into medical records like a breadcrumb trail designed to lead your tormentor exactly where the trap can spring shut around him. The chairs are up, ulstered in that particular shade of blue-green that only exists in hospitals and government buildings, chosen for its supposed calming properties, but somehow managing to increase anxiety instead. The clocks on different walls tick slightly out of sync, creating a subtle rhythm that makes time feel unstable. Like reality itself can't quite maintain consistency in this place, where too many secrets have been buried, and too many lies have been told to protect reputations that should have been destroyed years ago. Your phone vibrates at exactly 9:47 p.m. Unknown number, same as always, but this time instead of a voice message, an image arrives that makes your blood turn to ice water in your veins. It's a live shot of you, right now, sitting in the family lounge with your hands folded in your lap and your eyes fixed on the phone screen. The angle is impossible, too high for a security camera, too steady for a handheld device, too clear for surveillance equipment that should be grainy and distant. But what stops your heart completely is what you see when you look closer at the image. There are two figures in that photograph. You, sitting exactly as you're sitting right now, and a second you standing just behind your chair, slightly out of phase like a double exposure, smiling in a way that suggests intimate knowledge of terrible things. The supernatural whisper creeps through the sterile hospital air without any monsters or ethereal beings, just the impossible mathematics of existing in two places at once, of being photographed by a camera that shouldn't exist from an angle that defies the architecture of the building you're sitting in. You look over your shoulder at the empty space behind your chair, then back at the phone screen where your double continues smiling that knowing smile. The timestamp on the photo reads 9:47 p.m., exactly the moment it was sent, exactly the moment you received it, exactly the moment you're living right now. Detective Reeves' voice crackles through your earpiece, reporting that all positions are secure, all cameras are recording, all officers are in place and ready for whatever comes next. But her words feel distant and meaningless when you're staring at photographic evidence that reality has developed cracks too wide for logic to bridge. The power dips without warning, plunging the hospital corridor into darkness for 3 seconds that stretch like hours. Emergency lights flare to life, casting everything in hellish red illumination that transforms familiar spaces into something alien and threatening. In that crimson glow, shadows move in ways that suggest substance where there should only be absence. Your doppelganger's voice arrives through a wall intercom that shouldn't be connected to any outside line, shouldn't be accessible to anyone who doesn't work for the hospital, shouldn't be capable of transmitting a signal that reaches every speaker in the delivery wing simultaneously. Let's start over. The words echo through the hospital's emergency lighting system, your own voice speaking from speakers that shouldn't be connected to any outside signal. But it's not quite your voice. It's older somehow, flatter, like emotion has been sandpapered away by experiences you haven't lived through yet. Emergency lights sputter to life with the mechanical whine of generators kicking in, casting the delivery wing in that hellish red glow that makes everything look like a crime scene waiting to happen. You and Detective Reeves move through corridors that should be familiar from the reconnaissance you did yesterday. But the blackout has scrambled more than just the electrical systems. Routes that led to room 347 now dead-end at walls that weren't there during daylight hours. The sting operation is still live, despite the power failure. Decoy officers maintain positions at the nurse's station, their earpieces crackling with status updates that sound increasingly surreal in the crimson darkness. Cameras tucked behind privacy curtains continue recording, their infrared sensors adapting to the emergency lighting like mechanical eyes that never need to blink. Your planted family file waits in medical records 6 rooms away, labeled with your mother's maiden name like bait in a trap that might already be springing shut around the wrong person. But something fundamental has changed in the hospital's architecture since the lights went out. The old Observation 3 sign hangs exactly where you remember seeing a drywall patch during your afternoon walkthrough. The paint looks fresh, the lettering crisp, as if decades of renovation and modernization never happened in this particular stretch of corridor. You check your watch. 2:17 a.m. The numbers glow green against your wrist, but when you look again 30 seconds later, it reads 2:21 a.m. 4 minutes have vanished from your timeline, skipping right past 2:19, the exact time when your neighbor's porch light blinks twice every night, the exact time when impossible things seem to slip through cracks in reality you didn't know existed. Dr. Klein steps from a side corridor like he's been waiting for this moment his entire career. His face shows genuine surprise at seeing you with Detective Reeves, but underneath the shock, you catch something else. Recognition mixed with what might be guilt or fear or simply the exhaustion that comes from keeping secrets too long. This wing's been closed since the late 80s, he says, his eyes flicking toward a window that should be bricked over but now shows clear glass reflecting emergency lights like a mirror into another timeline. His statement doesn't make sense with the ongoing renovations, the active patient rooms, the nurse's station that was fully staffed 12 hours ago. Detective Reeves presses him about the donor records, about the second hospital bracelet your mother finally admitted existed. Dr. Klein deflects with the smooth efficiency of someone who spent decades navigating medical liability and legal complications. Sealed adoptions, he explains. Court orders that supersede normal record-keeping protocols. Microfilm reels that went missing during a flood in the basement storage area sometime in the mid-90s. Every answer feels rehearsed, like lines from a script he's been practicing for 30 years, waiting for the day when someone woo. LD finally asked the right questions about births that shouldn't have happened and children who officially never existed. You find yourself in a supply closet lit only by your phone's flashlight, boxes of old clinic tapes stacked floor to ceiling like archives of forgotten medical procedures. In the back corner, behind supplies that look like they haven't been touched since the Reagan administration, your fingers close around a brittle ledger bound in cracked leather that feels ancient under your fingertips. The pages crackle as you flip through entries handwritten in faded blue ink, dates and times and medical codes that tell stories of births and complications and outcomes that were never meant to be scrutinized by anyone outside the hospital staff who recorded them. Then you find it, your birth date, your mother's name, and 2 bracelet numbers, A and B, issued at the same time from the same delivery. Bracelet B is marked with a single word that makes your blood freeze: non-viable. The intercom system crackles to life again, your older voice providing navigation like GPS coordinates into nightmare territory. North stairs, 2 landings, left, stop. The directions feel specific, urgent, like someone who knows this building's layout better than the people who work here every day. Your phone vibrates with an incoming image. Another impossible photograph, this one showing you from behind as you stand reading the ledger in the supply closet. But the angle is wrong again, taken from a position where nobody could possibly be standing, by a camera that shouldn't exist in a closet that's been locked for who knows how long. The moral dilemma hits you like a physical weight pressing against your chest. Chase the double who's been tormenting you for weeks, or secure the ledger that might contain evidence of whatever medical procedure created 2 identical people from what should have been a single birth. Each choice carries consequences you can't predict, paths that lead into unknown territory where the wrong decision could cost you everything you've been fighting to protect. You choose the ledger. Knowledge feels more valuable than confrontation, evidence more important than revenge. You photograph every page with your phone, uploading the images to a cloud storage account your doppelganger hopefully can't access, creating backup copies of backup copies, because you've learned not to trust any single system to preserve information that powerful people might want to disappear. Detective Reeves pursues a shadow down the corridor, her footsteps echoing off sterile walls that seem to stretch further than they should in a building you walked through yesterday. Her radio crackles with static, then her voice cuts through the interference, tight with breath and confusion and something that might be genuine fear. "I saw you twice." The words hang in the air like smoke, confirmation of what you've suspected but been afraid to acknowledge. You're not the only version of yourself moving through this hospital tonight. Somewhere in these corridors, your doppelganger is walking the same floors, breathing the same antiseptic air, following the same impossible breadcrumb trail that led you both back to the place where this story began 3 decades ago. You follow the intercom directions, moving through passages that feel familiar in ways that don't make sense, until you reach what should be a bricked-over nursery window, but now shows clear glass reflecting emergency lights like a portal into parallel realities. On the inside surface, pressed against the glass like someone trapped behind transparent walls, you see your own handprint. The print is perfect, every ridge and whorl matching your own fingerprints with forensic precision, but it's facing inward as if placed there by someone standing in a room that shouldn't exist, in a space that was supposedly sealed off and abandoned years before you were born. You lift your palm toward the cold glass surface, and the handprint inside presses back in perfect synchronization, matching your movement with the precision of a mirror that reflects not just images but intentions, not just appearances but the deeper patterns that make you uniquely yourself. The handprint inside presses back in perfect synchronization, but as your palm meets the cold glass surface, the window begins to tremble like water disturbed by stones you can't see. The reflection fractures into 3 overlapping images, each one showing a different version of yourself making choices that lead down paths you didn't take but somehow still remember walking. In the first reflection, the hospital sting operation tightens around your doppelganger like a perfectly orchestrated trap. You watch yourself coordinate with Detective Reeves as orderlies move to close off exit routes, their movements choreographed with military precision. Security monitors light up with access logs showing a badge swipe from a user identification number that doesn't exist in any personnel database. A digital fingerprint left by someone who officially never worked at this hospital, but somehow knows every corridor, every stairwell, every hiding place where shadows can become human. The second reflection shows you in a different timeline entirely, sitting across from Dr. Klein in a dim study lined with medical journals and boxes of donor logs that smell like decades of carefully preserved secrets. His hands shake as he admits to irregularities in the record-keeping, using terms that feel like euphemisms for something much larger, something threaded through hospital policy and profit margins, and the kind of medical procedures that happen in gray areas where ethics committees don't ask too many questions. In the third reflection, you're standing beneath television studio lights, explaining tetragrammatic chimerism to cameras that broadcast your words to millions of people who have been following this case, with the obsessive attention usually reserved for true crime podcasts and conspiracy theories. Comment feeds spike into vigilante fantasies, as viewers debate your guilt or innocence based on incomplete information and prejudices they didn't know they carried. Overnight, DNA collection kiosks appear at gas stations across California, market as community safety initiatives, but functioning more like checkpoints in a surveillance state that's forgotten the difference between protection and oppression. The actual hospital hallway remains quiet around you, emergency lights casting everything in that persistent red glow that makes even familiar spaces feel alien and threatening. The intercom system whispers words that shouldn't be possible, your own voice speaking from speakers that aren't connected to any microphone you've seen. All 3 happened to someone like you. Detective Reeves returns from her pursuit empty-handed, but rattled in ways that go deeper than professional frustration. Her body camera recorded flicker frames that look like you stepping directly into a solid wall, disappearing through concrete and drywall like physical laws are suggestions rather than absolute rules. The footage doesn't show monsters or supernatural entities, just a world where records, cameras, and clocks seem to misremember basic facts about time and space and the immutable nature of architecture. You make your way back to the records room, driven by an urgency you can't entirely explain but can't ignore. Hidden behind files marked with outdated medical codes, you pry open a folder that's been mislabeled so many times the original contents are anyone's guess. Inside, a Polaroid photograph shows 2 hospital bracelets bearing your family surname, but the second initial is penned in handwriting that doesn't match any of the official documentation you've seen. Folded beneath the photograph, you discover a hand-drawn map of Sacramento's bike path system, the same routes the original Golden State Killer used to navigate between neighborhoods without being spotted by patrol cars or concerned citizens. But this version has been traced in red ink, ending at your childhood block with a precision that suggests intimate knowledge of your personal history. The path continues beyond your old address into a cul-de-sac that didn't exist when you were growing up there, a residential development that was built years after you moved away, but somehow feels connected to memories you shouldn't have of places you never lived. Someone has drawn arrows and notations in the margins, creating a navigation system for traveling through neighborhoods that exist in different decades simultaneously. As you study the map more closely, patterns emerge that reveal the Copycat's methodology isn't supernatural so much as it is sophisticated stagecraft. Unauthorized access to hospital scheduling systems allows him to move through buildings during shift changes when security is focused elsewhere. Manipulated power cycles create blackouts timed to coincide with his appearances, giving him cover while making witnesses question what they actually saw. The ambient sound loops explain how your voice has been speaking from intercoms and phones and speakers that shouldn't be connected to any external signal. Recorded conversations from years past, pieced together and played back at precisely calculated moments to create the illusion of real-time communication with someone who might not even be in the same building. But the sophistication of his toolkit raises questions that cut deeper than methodology. Is this elaborate performance a crusade against some perceived injustice? An elaborate form of vigilante justice that uses fear and confusion instead of violence to make whatever point he's trying to communicate? Or is it simply an extremely complex crime, psychological terrorism disguised as social commentary, designed to destroy your life for reasons you still don't understand? The moral tension feels like standing on a cliff edge where any choice you make could send you tumbling into consequences you're not prepared to face. If your doppelganger is trying to expose some conspiracy or cover-up related to your birth, then helping him might serve justice even though his methods feel like torture. But if he's simply using you as a prop in some personal fantasy about crime and punishment, then every moment you spend trying to understand his motivations is another moment he has to destroy everything you've built. You realize that the original Golden State Killer case was solved through patient detective work and advances in genetic science that took decades to develop. Your situation demands answers in days or weeks, compressed timeline where mistakes multiply and good intentions can backfire in ways that ruin innocent lives. The hospital's clock system chimes softly as it reaches 2:19 a.m., that magical minute when your neighbor's porch light blinks and impossible things slip through cracks in reality. The nursery intercom crackles to life one more time, but the voice that emerges sounds different, still yours, but speaking with the weariness of someone who's already lived through whatever comes next. "We picked the wrong truth." The words hang in the sterile air like a prophecy you're not sure you want to understand, suggesting that somewhere in the maze of choices and reflections and overlapping timelines, a decision was made that will determine not just your fate, but the fate of everyone whose life has been touched by this impossible case. We picked the wrong truth. The words follow you out of the hospital like a prophecy that's already started coming true, echoing in your mind as Detective Reeves drives through empty streets toward downtown Sacramento. The emergency lights of the hospital fade in the rearview mirror, but the weight of whatever revelation awaits feels heavier with every mile you put between yourself and the place where this nightmare began 31 years ago. The interview room at police headquarters feels like a fishbowl designed by someone who's read too many psychology textbooks. Transparent walls on 3 sides, humming HVAC system that creates white noise designed to keep conversations private while making everything feel slightly underwater. A steady camera mounted in the corner records every micro-expression, every nervous gesture, every moment of hesitation that might be interpreted as guilt by people who weren't there for the impossible things you've witnessed. Detective Reeves apologizes before she reads the charge, her voice carrying the professional courtesy of someone who understands that bureaucracy sometimes requires theater. Obstruction of justice tied to withheld records, a narrow accusation that's more about creating a controlled environment to break the stalemate than a actual punishment. The system needs you to make a choice, and this sterile room with its fluorescent lighting and institutional furniture is designed to pressure you into cooperation. You face a triple bind that feels like choosing between 3 different ways to destroy your life. Reveal your chimerism and the second hospital bracelet publicly, sacrificing the privacy you've spent weeks trying to protect, while potentially becoming a medical curiosity studied in textbooks for decades. Turn everything over to Detective Reeves quietly, trusting the same system that has already leaked information about your DNA match and turned your neighborhood into a surveillance state. Or hold back until you can verify what that voice from tomorrow meant about picking the wrong truth, risking deeper suspicion while time runs out for finding answers that might save your sanity. The psychological dread builds through mundane details that feel amplified in this artificial environment. The tap of Detective Reeves' pen against her notepad creates a rhythm that gets under your skin like a metronome counting down to judgment. Coffee cooling in styrofoam cups fills the air with bitter aroma that mingles with the antiseptic smell of industrial cleaning products. The click of the digital recorder starting and stopping punctuates conversations like a mechanical heartbeat that never quite syncs with your own pulse. You choose transparency, partly because lying has gotten you nowhere and partly because the truth, however impossible it might sound, is the only weapon you have left in a fight that's been rigged against you from the beginning. You authorize the lab to disclose your chimerism diagnosis and release the relevant page from the hospital ledger, trading your privacy for the chance that scientific evidence might accomplish what circumstantial explanations cannot. Detective Reeves softens when she sees the lab results, her expression shifting from professional skepticism to something that might be genuine concern. She's seen outliers before, cases where biology and technology intersect in ways that confuse juries and challenge assumptions about identity and guilt. Your situation isn't unprecedented, just extraordinarily rare and poorly timed. She shows you a still frame from her body camera, captured during the hospital chase when she thought she was pursuing your doppelgänger through corridors that seemed to rearrange themselves in the darkness. The image shows two overlapping silhouettes where you stood alone, transparent figures occupying the same space like double exposures from an old camera that couldn't decide which moment to capture. The camera log registers 2:19 am when the photo was taken, but the wall clock in the room shows 2:17, and you distinctly remember checking your watch at 2:21 just seconds after the image was recorded. Time itself seems to bend around these encounters, creating pockets of temporal confusion that make documentation nearly impossible and witness testimony unreliable. The intercom system flickers once, then fails completely with an electronic whine that suggests power surge or system overload. In the silence that follows, a folded note appears under the interview room door without any sound of footsteps in the hallway outside. Two words written in your handwriting: North Stairwell 2:19. Detective Reeves stares at the note for a long moment, then looks at you with an expression that suggests she's made a decision that goes against her training, but aligns with her instincts. She's going to believe you, at least enough to test whether your impossible story might contain enough truth to solve a case that's already defied every conventional investigative approach. She orders a controlled experiment with the precision of a forensic scientist setting up a crime scene recreation. Two officers positioned at the stairwell landing with synchronized watches calibrated to atomic clocks. You positioned at the base of the stairs where security cameras can record every angle simultaneously. Digital timestamps, backup recordings, redundant documentation designed to capture whatever happens next with scientific rigor that will stand up in court if this evidence ever sees a jury. As 2:18 transitions to 2:19, the air pressure in the stairwell shifts in ways that feel familiar from the hospital nursery. The same physical unease that comes from standing in places where reality has developed cracks too small to see, but large enough to let impossible things slip through. Not monstrous or supernatural, just fundamentally wrong in ways that make your nervous system scream warnings about dangers it can't identify or classify. The landing above you blurs like heat shimmer rising from summer asphalt, distortion that shouldn't be possible in a climate-controlled government building where temperature stays constant year-round. The officers report seeing movement through their peripheral vision, shapes that disappear when they try to focus directly on them, like trying to stare at stars that only appear when you're not looking. At exactly 2:19, according to every synchronized timepiece in the building, someone steps out of the shimmer wearing that navy blue university hoodie you remember wanting but never buying. The same figure from the parking garage, the same impossible reflection of choices you never made and paths you never walked. He moves with your gait, breathes with your rhythm, exists with the casual confidence of someone who belongs in whatever reality he stepped out of. He lifts a small flash drive toward the security camera, the gesture deliberate and unhurried, like he's posing for a photograph that will be studied by investigators for years to come. When he speaks, his voice carries the calm certainty of someone delivering a message he's rehearsed for decades. This is how we prove it. The words hang in the air between you and your doppelganger as you stand barely an arm's length apart on the police station landing, separated by what feels like an invisible seam in reality itself. Neither of you crosses that threshold, as if some unspoken law of physics prevents two versions of the same person from occupying identical space in the timeline that matters most. Detective Reeves' eyes dart between the two of you with the rapid focus of someone whose worldview is being rewritten in real time. Her Bria. TH catches and holds as she witnesses proof that no camera will ever properly capture, evidence that exists only in the moment of observation, too fragile for digital recording but too undeniable for rational dismissal. Finally, someone else can see what you've been experiencing, validate the impossible encounters that have been slowly destroying your sanity for weeks. Your double sets the terms without menace or threat, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who's waited 31 years for this conversation. 2 minutes to talk before the seam closes, and whatever temporal anomaly allows this meeting collapses back into normal causality. 2 minutes to explain what he is, and why he's been systematically dismantling your life with surgical precision. He's not an evil twin or vengeful spirit, he explains, but something more complex and infinitely more disturbing. A fold of cause and effect, another version of you who wasn't chosen by paperwork, signed decades ago in hospital corridors, where administrators made decisions about which birth records would remain official, and which would disappear into filing systems that nobody was meant to access again. He was raised in a different county, shaped by different neighborhood watch programs, molded by different sets of fears and different responses to the same fundamental terror that defined California in the 1970s and 80s. The Golden State Killer wasn't just a criminal in his timeline. He was a catalyst that transformed entire communities into surveillance networks where neighbors monitored neighbors, and everyone learned to live with locks and cameras, and the persistent anxiety that safety was always temporary, always fragile, always dependent on technologies that promised protection but delivered paranoia instead. Your double never harmed anyone, he insists. His recreations of the copycat crimes carefully choreographed demonstrations designed to expose the system rather than terrorize innocent people. Every micro break-in, every rearranged object, every cryptic message was meant to illustrate how fear combined with data becomes a weapon that targets the innocent first and asks questions later. How genetic databases and neighborhood apps and doorbell cameras create digital nets designed to catch predators, but perfectly calibrated to trap people whose only crime is existing in the wrong place with the wrong DNA at the wrong historical moment. He names it the panopticon, borrowing from philosophical concepts about surveillance and social control that feel prophetic when applied to a world where everyone watches everyone else through devices that remember everything and forgive nothing. Not a monster lurking in shadows, but a mirror reflecting the logical endpoint of communities that prioritize security over privacy, safety over freedom, order over the messy uncertainties that come with treating people like individuals rather than data points in algorithmic systems designed by people who never have to live under the surveillance they create. The flash drive he's been holding contains proof of his methodology, scheduling hacks that gave him access to hospital systems, power cycle scripts that created blackouts timed to his appearances, metadata trails that will exonerate you while implicating hospital administrators for record tampering rather than blood crimes. Evidence that transforms him from criminal mastermind into whistleblower, from threat to your safety into threat to the institutional systems that created this nightmare in the first place. The moral dilemma tightens around you like a vice designed to crush good intentions. If you release everything on that drive, the public panic could transform your city into a permanent curfew state where everyone lives under martial law disguised as public safety initiatives. If you release nothing, the DNA surveillance grid becomes standard law enforcement practice, expanding from criminal investigations into predictive policing that treats genetic profiles like criminal backgrounds waiting to be discovered. You negotiate a middle path with the urgency of someone whose time is running out. Targeted release that forces institutional audits without igniting the mob mentality that turns complex problems into simplistic solutions involving more surveillance, more restrictions, more systems designed to make people feel safe while making freedom impossible. Surgical revelation that exposes specific corruption without destroying public trust in the scientific methods that actually solve crimes when applied with appropriate oversight and ethical constraints. The trade happens across that invisible seam with the formality of a diplomatic exchange. He extends the flash drive toward you while you offer the second hospital bracelet, the one marked non-viable that your mother kept hidden for 3 decades. Physical tokens of proof changing hands between versions of the same person, each item carrying weight that goes far beyond its material properties. The seam shivers as the exchange completes, reality lurching by a few degrees like a building settling on a foundation that wasn't quite level to begin with. Detective Reeves mutters something under her breath that sounds like swearing mixed with prayer, then stares at her badge with the confused expression of someone who's forgotten their own name. "My badge number just changed," she whispers, her voice carrying the hollow tone of someone whose certainty about basic facts has just been shattered. Not gore or violence or supernatural terror, but the eerie wrongness of details rearranging themselves, of small constants becoming variables in equations that were supposed to be solved and stable. Your doppelganger steps backward into the shimmer that brought him here, his figure becoming translucent as the temporal anomaly begins to collapse. The landing returns to normal lighting and air pressure, leaving only the flash drive in your hand as evidence that any of this actually happened. Detective Reeves blinks rapidly, her expression suggesting she's already beginning to question whether she really saw 2 of you, or if the stress of this impossible case has finally pushed her past the boundaries of reliable perception. You slot the flash drive into an air-gapped laptop that Detective Reeves produces from the evidence kit, isolated from network connections prevent any malware from spreading beyond this controlled environment. The folders begin loading with the methodical progress of a system processing files that should contain answers to weeks of questions that have been destroying your life, one impossible encounter at a time. But as the directory structure populates, the folders vanish like digital mirages, replaced by a single text file that contains only 2 lines of text that make your blood freeze in your veins. Tomorrow, 2:19. Bring the map. The cryptic message burns in your mind as morning light filters through the police station windows, transforming the sterile interview room into something that almost resembles normal. But outside, the city has changed overnight in ways that make normalcy feel like a luxury you can no longer afford. New posters appear on utility poles and community center bulletin boards like digital weeds sprouting from municipal anxiety. Community DNA pilot, protect your block. They announce in friendly fonts that can't quite disguise the surveillance state implications lurking beneath the cheerful graphics. The city council rushes through a resolution, while neighborhood watch groups resume their weekly sweeps with renewed enthusiasm. Armed with apps that gamify reporting suspicious behavior and devices that make genetic collection as easy as checking the weather. The copycat activity has stopped completely, but the machinery of fear hasn't. If anything, your doppelganger's demonstrations have accomplished exactly what they were designed to do: prove that communities terrified of invisible threats will voluntarily surrender freedoms they spent centuries fighting to protect. The absence of new incidents only feeds the narrative that aggressive surveillance works. That privacy is a small price to pay for the illusion of safety in a world where danger could be hiding behind any face that looks familiar. You and Detective Reeves follow the next breadcrumb in this impossible scavenger hunt, making your way to the library's local history room at exactly 2:19 p.m. with the Sacramento bike path map folded carefully in your jacket pocket. The librarian who greets you moves with the quiet efficiency of someone who's been expecting this visit, sliding a bound volume across the desk with the practiced discretion of a person who spent decades helping people find information they weren't sure they wanted to discover. The book contains city planning minutes spanning 40 years of municipal decision-making, zoning debates, and development approvals that shaped Sacramento into the place you grew up calling home. But someone has circled your childhood block in red ink, marking it for attention years before the first foundation was poured, before the first family moved into houses that were still architectural drawings when this notation was made. Inside the volume, tucked between pages documenting sewer line installations and traffic light placements, you find a sealed envelope addressed to you in handwriting that makes your blood freeze with recognition. Your own penmanship, but aged somehow, written with the careful deliberation of someone who's had years to consider exactly what words would be needed for this moment. The note inside is devastatingly simple: release the hospital audit, not the scripts. Alongside the message, a still photograph shows two hospital bassinets positioned side by side, two bracelets visible on tiny wrists, the second initial clearly penned by a different hand than the one that wrote the first. Evidence of a decision made 31 years ago by people who thought their choice would never matter to anyone except medical records administrators filing paperwork in basement storage rooms. Dr. Klein isn't a singular boogeyman orchestrating conspiracies from hospital corridors, you realize. He's a conduit for a system that allowed records to become suggestions, documentation to become negotiable, official truth to become whatever was most convenient for institutions that prioritized liability management over accuracy. One doctor making one choice about which birth certificate would remain official and which would disappear, multiplied across decades of similar decisions that nobody was supposed to question or investigate or even remember. Detective Reeves argues for what she calls the small fire approach, targeted disclosures designed to force a judge to unseal specific records, and pause the DNA pilot program without creating the kind of public panic that transforms complex problems into mob justice. Surgical revelations that expose institutional failure without destroying public trust in the scientific methods that actually help solve crimes when applied with appropriate oversight and ethical constraints. At exactly 2:19, your doppelganger leans into the doorway during that minute of temporal overlap that allows impossible meetings in spaces where reality develops cracks. He doesn't cross the threshold, respecting whatever physical laws govern these encounters, but his eyes meet yours with an intensity that carries the weight of shared experience and mutual understanding. "Choose us," he says, his voice carrying the calm certainty of someone who spent weeks orchestrating this moment. "We're both innocent. Let the system prove itself capable of distinguishing between genetic similarity and criminal guilt, between correlation and causation, between the fear of what might happen and the evidence of what actually did." The choice feels like standing at a crossroads where every direction leads to consequences you can't fully predict but will have to live with forever. Burn everything down with comprehensive revelations that might protect you while destroying public faith in institutions that, for all their flaws, occasionally serve justice. Or light one careful fuse that forces systemic change, without feeding the vigilante fantasies that turn complex investigations into mob tribunals where being different is the same as being guilty. You choose the targeted approach, partly because it feels more ethical and partly because your doppelganger's patient manipulation has taught you that sometimes the most effective solutions are the ones that work slowly and leave room for people to save face while doing the right thing. A press conference with Detective Reeves, careful language about chimerism and sealed adoptions, and the statistical risks of false positives in genetic databases that aren't designed to account for biological edge cases. No sensationalism, no graphic details, no fuel for the vigilante fires that have been smoldering in comment sections and neighborhood apps since your case became public knowledge. Just facts presented with the clinical precision of people who understand that justice depends on accuracy more than outrage, on evidence more than emotion, on systems that work reliably rather than ones that work dramatically. The City Council votes to pause the DNA pilot program pending a comprehensive audit of genetic matching protocols and data storage security. A judge signs an emergency order to unseal the delivery wings records from 1992, opening files that have been sealed for 3 decades, and creating a legal pathway for other people who might discover similar discrepancies in their own medical histories. The press conference generates coverage that focuses on policy implications rather than personal drama, on systematic improvements rather than individual blame, on the kind of measured reform that actually changes things instead of just making people feel like something has been accomplished. Your neighborhood begins to feel less like a surveillance zone and more like a place where people live, the cameras and suspicion gradually fading as the fear that created them loses its grip on the collective imagination. That night, for the first time in months, your neighbor's porch light stays dark at 2:19 a.m. The blinking pattern that marked moments when impossible things slip through cracks in reality finally stops, suggesting that whatever temporal anomaly allowed your encounters with your doppelganger has resolved itself or moved on to torment someone else in a different timeline where different choices led to different consequences. Your phone pings with an incoming voicemail, the timestamp showing tomorrow's date with the precision of a system that's learned to bend time around the edges where causality becomes negotiable. One sentence in your own voice, spoken with the weary satisfaction of someone who's finally reached the end of a very long and very strange journey. We did enough. You press play on the voicemail that arrived from tomorrow, your own voice speaking across temporal boundaries that shouldn't exist but somehow do. The message is brief, tinged with exhaustion and relief in equal measure, thanking you for choosing the smaller fire instead of burning everything down in a blaze of revelations that might have felt satisfying but wouldn't have served justice. The targeted release tips the balance exactly as your doppelganger predicted it would. The DNA pilot program gets paused statewide while legislators debate privacy safeguards and accuracy standards that should have been implemented before genetic surveillance became routine. The hospital's record tampering triggers an independent review that uncovers decades of shortcuts and administrative decisions that treated documentation like suggestions, rather than sacred trust between institutions and the people they serve. Dr. Klein faces inquiry for irregular documentation practices, but he's not portrayed as a monstrous figure orchestrating conspiracies. Instead, he becomes a symbol of the culture that lets shortcuts stand, the systematic complacency that allows important details to disappear when they become inconvenient for people who prioritize efficiency over accuracy. Detective Reeves closes your file with a public statement that explains chimerism in language regular people can understand, describing how genetic genealogy solved a historic case, but can also mislead when scaled beyond its intended purpose. Her words are respectful, clear, tinged with hope that people can learn from complexity rather than retreat into simplistic solutions that feel safer but solve nothing. Your neighborhood watch disbands its blacklist system. Porch cameras return to ordinary use, monitoring packages and pets rather than neighbors whose only crime was existing in the wrong genetic database at the wrong historical moment. People learn, slowly and imperfectly, about the flaws in systems and in themselves, about the difference between safety and surveillance, between protection and paranoia. The Copycat case becomes a cautionary tale about fear and data rather than launching a new reign of terror. Documentaries will be made, academic papers will be written, but the story serves education rather than entertainment, wisdom rather than sensationalism. You never see your double again, but tiny shifts remain in the world he briefly touched. Detective Reeves' badge number stays 1 digit off from what it used to be. A coffee mug sits on the wrong shelf in your kitchen. The brick nursery window sometimes reflects the faint outline of that old observation 3 sign when light hits it at exactly the right angle. Tonight, you step onto your porch at 2:18 a.m., breathing air that feels calm for the first time in months. At 2:19, nothing happens. The porch light burns steady, no mysterious blinking to mark moments when impossible things slip through cracks in reality. Or maybe everything happens quietly, subtly, in ways too small to notice but too significant to ignore. If this alternate timeline, what if history story pulled you into its web of genetic mysteries and doppelganger horror, hit that subscribe button for more spine-chilling explorations of how history could have twisted into nightmare. Like and share to help us grow this midnight community of people who aren't afraid to ask what if the impossible was possible. Drop a comment and tell us, would you have chosen the small fire or the big blaze? Which detail gave you the deepest chills? The 2:19 temporal seam, the mirrored handprint pressing back through glass, or the bike path map that led to places that shouldn't exist? Thank you for joining us on this journey through genetic genealogy gone wrong and surveillance paranoia made manifest. Sleep with the porch light on tonight if it helps you feel safer. Sometimes the most ordinary things become talismans against the extraordinary darkness that lurks in the spaces between what we know and what we fear might be true.